Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Peter Keegan and I am a full-time artist, and I'm going to be running this rather special demonstration this evening in order to celebrate the launch of my winter classes on Zoom this year, and also to give you an opportunity to watch me at work in my natural habitat. Before I get on, we are all good to go. First of all, where do we start? Okay, it's the most kind of complex and challenging thing I find. Where on earth do you start a portrait? Now, I want to say very clearly, there is no right or wrong way to paint a portrait. There's a multitude of ways of painting portraits. I'm just going to show you the way that I love, the way I find that's most freeing, most expressive. I suppose the way that's most authentic to the way that I paint, and also is going to give you a little bit of a tease of some of the classes that I'll be teaching as well this winter, if you're particularly interested in that process. So I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of a loose sketch. We're going to do a bit of sketching and a bit of draftsmanship. So I'm going to take a number 4 brush. So I'm going to take this number 4 rosemary brush. It's sort of a lovely hog, so it's nice and loose. I'm going to take my solvent. So my Miracle Medium solvent is in this little tub. So I'm going to put a little bit on the brush there. And I'm going to start off just by christening the palette. I'm just going to get the palette just a little bit wet. And I'm also going to put on a little bit of raw umber. So raw umber is wonderful because it's nice and thin and I can move it around. And of course it dries super quickly as well. So it's a really, really good color for that. So get that moved on. All right, so let's start off. First of all, let's just make some mess. I think sometimes we can be a little bit panicked sometimes that everything has to be perfect, and that can be really worrying sometimes when there's just that blank canvas come through. So just take the brush and just make a mess. Okay, let's christen the canvas. Let's make this canvas ours. Let's not be too scared and too intimidated by it. Let's start making some marks, and I want to get an idea of where this chap's head is, and already I want to sort of get a good placement of the head in the middle there, give me lots of scope to play with the hair. I might crop the hair out, I might not have all of it painted fully, and I'm just finding the shape of the face, finding the head, finding the body, finding the hair, using these lovely loose freeing scribbly marks. And I'm aware of where there's going to be negative space, so where there's going to be a little bit of background, where the hair is going to go, the pivot, the angle of the head. I want the head to be a decent size. I'd like it to be approximately life size. So, you know, if I make where the hairline is to the bottom of the chin, if I make it about the width of my hand, which is from my ring finger to my thumb, that wider span I could do, that's a good useful guide for creating something that's approximately life size, because that's the same distance from my chin to my forehead. And it's one of those universal measurements. If you've got your hand outstretched, it'll be from your chin to your forehead. That's where the hairline is, or in my case, is slowly disappearing and used to be, or where the skull starts to tip back. So that's going to be quite a useful point. The reason being, of course, if I work with a life-size head, it not only feels more real, but it's also, again, it's another one of those things that makes it certainly easier to paint. So that's something that I'm always looking out for in terms of a scale, because for me, that's quite an important part. I'm just going to make sure I can see that on the screen. Fabulous. Right, let's start scribbling in a little bit more. Now I'm keeping my brushwork quite light. You notice it's not heavy, it's not overly strong and specific. Let's get an idea of a couple of eye sockets, which are just giant, big, round, goggly shapes, and something of a nose-like shape. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit just so I can see it all in context. So you've got a shape of a nose and an eye socket up there, and something of a mouth. And what I find amazing is that if I was to show a large number of people this picture at this early stage, if I showed 100 people and said, what do you think I'm painting? I would hope that about 80%, maybe even less, 50% would say, oh, it looks like you're about to paint a face. With so little information, we can convey something that is universally familiar, which is painting a face. And I think there's something really amazing about that, how with very little, I can say a lot, which is something that I find really fascinating about painting anyway, particularly my own journey as an artist, that I don't have to say a lot for it to read as something familiar, something that we are aware of what it's trying to represent. And just by doing two information there, and there, I've created something of a face. Now, we all know that's relatively easy. We can do that. We've done that ever since we were a child, which is 2 dots, a nose and a smiley mouth. That's something that we've all got experience of doing. But of course, there's a great difference between painting any old face and that face, the specific face. And this is the point where I'm starting to think of this face, not in terms of outlines, you know, there isn't really any outlines in this at all, but I'm thinking of this in terms of shapes and form. And this is back to why working from a good photograph is so important. And I'm focusing on these strong shadow shapes, and the shadow shapes which are cast on the right-hand side of the face. And my brush is just wandering around where the face is, sort of getting familiar of where that interesting relationship is. And I'm using raw umber. Now, raw umber is such a great color because it's a fast dryer. It's very, very forgiving. It melts away. And if any of this was not satisfactory, I could completely rub it away and it would completely disappear. So it's very, very forgiving in that respect. So I do love raw umber. It's very, very good for making darks without having to always lean into adding a black, say. I love how it's got a classical, this is another reason why I chose this face. I love that there's a classical nod to it, which I really is quite beguiling. And let's get that sense of that neck as it turns down there. And I want to get a sense of that darkness that I can see in the hair on the right. And the way that sort of darkness of the hair almost melts into the face, and allow those brush strokes to start moving away into that fireworks that is the fantastic hair, which of course is another aspect that I chose to paint. I need to give him a name. I don't know his name. His name didn't come with the reference image. I'm gonna have to think of a good. Anyone got a good suggestion of what the name should be for this young chap? But there's something particularly interesting about that. So, you know, I've got that strong sculptural feeling, and this is something that I would do with sketching. You know, sketching is really important. I could do this I love doing things like this with just pencil. I could sort of do it with things like charcoal, which is a lovely painterly medium anyway. So this is something that I would really encourage for those people that wish to kind of work in this loose, free sort of manner, is to think about sketching more. And a lot of artists, you know, teachers and so on, sort of always advocate and are very for working and doing lots of sketching and drawing. And unfortunately, I'm one of them, because it does certainly help. We've got some great Romeo and Hector and Andrew, something Roman, Titus, well, I like Titus, Matthew, Rufus. Rufus is good. Leo, Apollo. He's got an Apollo look to him, hasn't he? There's something very kind of Greeky classical. Whilst I think about that, I'm going to take a piece of kitchen paper. It's another piece of highly useful painting tool. And I'm going to use this, of course, to wipe away a little bit, so I can start taking things away. And I'm sure you've done this if you've worked with charcoal, where sometimes you kind of stain the piece of paper with charcoal dust, and then you can sort of, through a process of editing and wiping away, we can take away stuff. So sometimes I'm not just adding paint, but I'm actually taking away paint, because I'm not that good that every single mark lands in perfectly the correct place. So every now and then, if I want to clean something up and take it away, I'm just going to use a piece of kitchen paper. So I'm using 2 drawing tools. I'm using the brush, and I'm using this, and you can see how the raw umber just has this lovely melty quality, and that works particularly well because this canvas is primed, by the way. That's a really important thing. The fact that there's a little bit of acrylic on this really helps the paint move around. If this was an absorbent chalky canvas, like a canvas that you buy fresh from the shop, and it was in its cellophane, and you opened it and it has that very rough quality, it can be a little hard to do this, because of course that chalky canvas wants to suck and absorb this oil paint. But because it's got this non-absorbent acrylic primer and acrylic paint, it allows the oil paint to slip and slide. So oil can sit on acrylic. Remember, acrylic cannot sit on oil, but oil can quite happily sit on acrylic. We've got some other great names. Icarus. Oh, I like the name Icarus. That's good. He does look like he could be a bit of an Icarus, looking up to the sky and to the heavens, that he's about to try and fly. And maybe that's going to signal something rather unfortunate happening to him, that pride and the fall that's about to happen. So maybe we'll call him Icarus. That's quite a nice name. Let's move around. So I'm going to continue drawing and sculpting this, essentially this tonal sketch, which is all this is. It's just a tonal a sketch. And I'm going to keep using the word sketch because I appreciate that I'm painting. I know you think I'm painting here, but actually I'm not. This is not painting. This is drawing. For me, all painting is drawing. Drawing is just good mark making, good putting things in the right place. And I'd like to try and get all these marks in the right place. So for me, painting sometimes can denote something of this, you know, where people are doing that, or when they're painting the walls up and down, spreading. I don't feel I'm doing that. I'm feeling my mark making is more joyful, more free, more liberating. So I'm not painting, I'm drawing. All painting is drawing. And there's almost something psychological, the fact that I'm telling myself I'm drawing. It's helping me really, really focus on getting the sense of where things are, like placement and proportions and so on. If I said, all right, now I'm painting it, I would sort of almost psychologically start, you know, the obvious painty brush marks, which for me, I don't think are going to be the things that I really want to really get correct. So I've got a sense of where his eye is in that region there. He's got something of a cheekbone. So now I've got him looking in a direction. Okay, I can tell he's looking this way. I can see bits out of proportion. The chin's all the way down there. So I know that there's still something to move around. I'm going to do a few more little marks. I'm going to start placing the nostrils. Those are quite important. Now, for me, this is really important because I want to make sure I get the nose in the right place, but also I want to make sure I don't fall into that number one mistake, which what I call the number one mistake for good amateur portrait painters. And do we know what that is? What's the most common mistake good amateur portrait painters make? And it's the one I made for years and years and years and years, rather embarrassingly. And that's making the nose too long. Okay, we want to avoid making the nose too long. I don't want to make that look too long. So this is where my little measuring stick comes into play. I'll sometimes bring out the measuring stick, which is the handle of my paintbrush, and I'll start looking at angles. And this is one of the first secrets to creating, you know, good, accurate likeness and proportions. I'm going to take a point of reference. So in this case, I'm going to go from, let's say, the eye. And I'm going to say the eye on the left, and I'm going to go his iris. The kind of pupil iris shape, which is that bit there. And I'm going to take that point from there to the point of his nostril. So from there to there. So the point of this eye on the left as it looks to us, and the nostril on the left, again, as it looks to us. I'm going to take the handle of my paintbrush and sort of rest it on top of both the pupil and the inner darkness of that shape. And that's an angle. And I'm going to bring that stick over the handle to make sure that the point there and the point there line up. That's really, really important. And again, I'm going to check not just from the photograph to the drawing. And again, if this was from life, I would do it from life as well. But I would also then check, once I've made the mark, check your painting or the drawing mark and over to that to make sure it reads. Sometimes people just read from image to painting, but it's really important that you also measure it the other way around, from painting to image, just to make sure that you get that sense of consistency. And then to triple check that that nostril is in the correct place in that, I'm also going to find another reference point. And that other reference point for me is going to be the eye on the left. Now, I know this eye on the left has to be a little bit higher than the eye on the right. It has to sit a fraction higher, which this eye feels like it is sitting a little bit higher than this one on the left. So I'm now going to go from where the pupil is on the eye on the left down to the same nostril in question. So I'm going to hold that up, get the angle about right, which is there, bring it over and see if it's the same, which to my eye looks pretty much the same. Let's check the other way around. Let's go from the middle of that dark splodge to the nostril, bring it over, and that reads. And then let's check from there over to there. So what that does, that means that has to be in the right place. Okay, I've measured it and that is in the right place. And what I've just done, I've measured an angle. I've measured a point to point angle, point A to point B. So point A in this case being the eye, to point B being the nostril. And I checked that and double checked it against point C, if you like, from this eye to point B, the nostril over here. So that all kind of checks and reads right. So I have a relationship that's starting to make sense with each other. So I can now plot the nostril on the right, which I can see is a little bit higher up than the nostril, sorry, on the left. So I've got that sort of shape there, and I can start building out from that. So angles like that are really, really important. I'm constantly looking for angles, points of reference. And that's one of the main secrets about how we get, you know, likeness and accuracy, which, by the way, isn't exclusive to painting a portrait, I mean, you could do the whole angle thing if you were painting a landscape or a still life, making sure that that apple is situated correctly next to the other fruit. So it does work for other things. It's not just things for portraiture. Now let's get a sense of where those lips are. I can see the upper lip is darker. The upper lip is darker compared to the bottom lip because, of course, he's slightly absent of light. He's got quite a pronounced Cupid's bow there, and put that in like that. So that's naturally kind of raising him up a little bit. The edge of his mouth, how far does the edge of the mouth go? I'm not quite sure where that line is. So what I'm going to do is check the other thing, the sort of second secret of good, accurate drawings. The first are angles, checking point-to-point angle, like the eye to the nose. The next I'm going to check is a line, so a straight line. And I'm going to go look at the straight point of that mouth, where this mouth finishes. Where does it relate to elsewhere on the reference image? So I'm going to take again the handle of the paintbrush I'm using and hold it as a dead straight line, and I'm going to move it across. You see, it's kind of dead parallel, like a plumb line, like a dead. It's not on a wonk. I'm trying to keep it as dead straight as possible. I'm going to bring it all the way across until it touches the edge of his mouth, which is about there, isn't it? It just touches the mouth, keeping it dead straight. And I have to ask myself, what else does that relate to on the reference image? And I can see that it's pretty much smack under his pupil, just to the right of his pupil on that eye. I'm pretty sure that's where that's going to be. So I'm going to now make sure that wherever that is, if I do an imagined line that goes all the way down there, that is where the mouth needs to stop. It can't be any further over than that because I've checked it. So it has to finish at about there. And then the same with the edge of the mouth on the right. If I hold my stick up, I can see that it's between the tear duct and the darkness of the eye, sort of in between the white of the eye there. So it's going to finish at about that point as well. So those are little methods that I'm looking for constantly to get things in the right place, because, you know, getting things in the right place of the portraiture is essential. You can get away with a landscape if the tree is a little bit too big or too small, or if it's a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. We can't do that with a nose or a mouth. If it's a little bit too left or the right, everyone's going to notice and it's not going to look good. Let's just plug that in there, make sure we've got enough juice on that. I'm going to lift up the light a little bit more here in the mouth. We've got a sense of the little bit, I'm using my fingers sometimes to paint, which you shouldn't do really, but a little bit of finger painting is fine. And as you see, he's got a massive chin. I thought his chin was all the way down there because I was outstretched my hand. I think the chin we can all see is going to move up. So let's just say thank you very much. He's done his job. Now, of course, as a result, the head has become smaller. But that doesn't matter, because when I stand back and look at the context of the whole scene within the canvas, it still works. It still reads fine. I still think it's a very, strong picture. If after so many minutes of me doing this, I were to look at the picture and I thought, you know what, it's just not strong anymore, or I've got the head in the wrong place, I would take my cloth and I would completely rub everything out and start all over again. And that does happen. That really does happen. I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. I'm trying to tell you that that is something that I would generally do. If it doesn't look strong within the first 10, 15 minutes, sometimes shorter, if all the brush strokes are landing in the correct place, I will rub it out and start again. And the reason being is I am a massive believer in a strong start. For me, a strong start is essential to a strong picture at the end. So for me, I think your finish is only as good as your start. If you've got a strong start, then I think that it's got legs to become a successful picture. I hate working on a picture that I'm constantly having to fight and fight and fight and wrestle with in order to make it work. I hate sort of doing that. I'd much rather things land and work as the painting is developing in a satisfactory way. Now, I do that in a very loose painterly way, as you can see, finding the face as it emerges, but I'm not one for going, oh, it's not good yet, I'm just going to keep battling and I'm going to keep fighting and keep battling and keep fighting, only for it to go, no, it's not actually working, it's not landing anymore. So for me, what I try and do is work on that. How is my start? If the start is feeling strong, then I'm going to carry on with it. And I'll show you some, give you a quick little tour. If time allows, during the break, I'll give you a quick little whistle-stop tour around the studio, and I'll show you some of the pictures that I'm working on at the moment. I've got a few commissions and a few other painting projects, and I'll just kind of show you and talk about how they kind of all started. So that side of the face is feeling okay. There's still little bits that need, you know, wiggling and adjusting. I can see this side of the face still feels a little bit too wide. There feels like that, perhaps a little bit too much flesh. I've made him look perhaps more angular, more stronger, as opposed to that kind of more youthful innocence he has, I suppose. Of vulnerability, I think, is perhaps a better word. He's got a little ear, isn't he? So I can just plonk the ear in, which is about sort of there, rubbing that away. And there's an ear there. I don't need to have to paint an ear, just to paint a sort of a smudgy sort of colour, a smudgy shape, and then your brains will go, golly, that looks a little like an ear. And then he's got more fabulous wiggly hair up there. And then his neck. Now I need to just adjust his neck a fraction, just to move it around, just to make sure that these shapes are reading. I'm going to just take away that excess. I love the way it sort of melts into the background. It's got a lovely painterly quality, which for me is really important. I'm going to talk more about that in part 2, about the way of painting, which for me is such an important aspect of my work, and work that I really enjoy. Okay, let's now look at the jawline. So he's got his neck, which comes about there, and then suddenly it kind of goes across. I had it a bit too, not quite in the right shape. Let's just zoom out and get a bit more of a context. So he's got that there, and then he's got his fabulous shape there. I'm going to push the paint a bit darker, just use a little bit more paint in that area as we go. I'm just showing, probably push the paint a little bit more. So it feels like it's got a lot of energy, a lot of painterliness to it. Ample opportunity for me to play with the pigment. We've got a great dark shape, which takes place at about there in the collarbone as it falls down into the neck. That's quite an important dark shape, which I'm going to plonk in there. Now, one thing I'm going to do, which I encourage all my students to do, is to take a photograph. So photograph your pictures as they develop. It's really important because you can see how your picture develops at a latter stage. And for me, a really important learning tool, a learning step-by-step approach, where I'm able to identify how the painting progresses when it works, and inevitably sometimes when it doesn't work. So I can look at a picture and say it was strong at this point, this point, this point, this point, and then from there something changed where it wasn't working. And by documenting the painting as it goes, I'm able to identify what stage was it going well, and then what stage did it all suddenly fall down. And it's a wonderful learning tool to reflect on what was working and then what was not working. For me, it was often overworking a picture, getting small brushes and really going too much within the detail. That was something that I always found that was problematic. And proportional things like making the nose too long, which was an important thing for me. So I always photograph the painting stage by stage. Quite often, I realized very quickly that I preferred my paintings in that more looser, raw, free state, as opposed to the ones that were more polished and overworked. That was something that I just enjoyed in my own work, which is unsurprising because I like that in the look of other artists' paintings as well. So photograph your paintings, always a good little tip. Right, I'd love to keep going and adding more and more, but I think that's enough. I've really got the feeling and the character, which for me is really important. The character, that the poise, the elegance, the pose, that youthfulness, the innocence, the vulnerability is what I'm trying to look for. These are the feelings that I'm trying to encapsulate in this picture. I'm not necessarily always going to be looking for accuracy. Even though there is strong resemblance, I'm not looking for 100% accuracy. I want resemblance. Resemblance is a kinder word. Likeness is too strict, too limiting. Resemblance is nicer. Resemblance is, well, it has to look a bit like that person. So all I'm aiming for at this stage is to create a picture that's around about between 50% and 80% accurate. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm going to continue trying to get the rest of the accuracy, that last, say, 20% of accuracy, at the end as the painting develops. So what I don't like to do is to create what's called a carbon copy. I'm not an artist that likes to make sure everything is exactly perfect, whether it's like a grid or a projection or a tight pencil or charcoal outline. For me, that takes away a lot of the fun of the painting. It takes away a lot of the painterly discovery and opportunities by creating outlines and boundaries. And I always feel that whenever I tried a painting in the past, a long time ago, where I did draw the outline, which with whatever method that I achieved that, the end painting just looked a little bit fixed and a bit still and stifled and overworked, like I was, I don't know, essentially colouring in a colouring in book, you know, where everything had been preconceived. There's still opportunity for discovery. There's still opportunity for painterliness. And I mean, if you look at this way of painting, there's a great similarity, of course, to the way that artists such as, you know, Rembrandt, of course, would have worked in a similar way. And other painterly painters whom I love, such as John Singer Sargent and Anders Zorn, and Sorolla, the Spanish master of light, and Velázquez and Frans Hals, you know, real painterly painters, painted, you know, in not necessarily this direct way, but similar ways where they're finding the face, and the face is evolving from mass and shape, not strict outlines. So no outlines, just wonderful shapes. Now I'd love to do some more, but I've got to get some flesh in because time is ticking away and I want to block in some flesh colours. So let's start finding something of the colours. Let's clean the palette quickly. Just take that bit of kitchen paper, take off the worst of that darkness, and let's take a decent sized brush. Let's take a number 8. Find a number 8 that's relatively clean. Can I find a clean brush? Not likely. Well, that feels pretty cleanish. Okay, so I'm going to use this brush and let's start painting in some bits and bobs. Right, what am I going to do? Let's start off relatively traditional. Okay, I'll start in a really traditional way. I'm going to work dark to light. When we work with oils, it's a really, really sensible strategy to work dark to light. You start with the darkest values first, which I've sort of already done. Already the dark bits are in. So now I can go into my sort of transitional half tones, which is the dark into middle value half tone areas. So for example, you know, these dark flesh bits on this side of the face, then I'll go into its middle values, and then I'm going to finish with the highlights. So that's one way of many ways that I can paint, and there are available to us to paint a portrait. So I'm going to take a bit of the raw umber as my dark mark, a bit of red, a bit of ochre, even a bit of orange, and let's just see what paint looks like. This is what I call palette play. Just have a play with the palette first. Just move some paint around and see what happens. Let's just see what combination, if I add a bit of white, a little bit of extra orange, maybe a bit of ochre. So I'm getting familiar with my colors. I mean, these are colors I know, but I just want to see how they're working in relation to what I'm seeing and how things read. So just explore the variety. And already it doesn't seem quite as scary anymore because I've got this, you know, wonderful channel and pool of subtle variety of colors there already available to me to start to play with. I'm not just working in one circular blob of one color. I'm working with a variety of subtle color, which is a much nicer way of working. So I'm going to start off with a bit more dark, a bit more red, and let's just blob that on and see how that feels, how that reads, and that feels not too bad. I'm relatively happy with that. So I'm going to use this and I'll try and make it about the same size so you can sort of get that sense of scale. So let's start putting some of those marks in straight away, and I'm painting into the raw umber marks that I did, and then let's zoom out a little bit just so I can see what's going on there. And let's start putting in. So this stage, this process has a variety of names. I call it the blocking in or the block in, where I'm putting in with relatively strong marks the right values, of course, the right tonal values, and as far as possible, trying to plonk them in the right place, that's what all painting is really, isn't it? Right colors, right value, right place. If we could all do that, then it'd be a piece of cake. But it's not that easy, but you get the idea. I'm trying to just put in the right colors, right values, right shapes. And I'm starting with these very bold, dark marks to begin with. Now, using this number 8 brush, is stopping me becoming too fussy and too fiddly too soon. Very important. I'm not using an ickle brush. I'm using a big solid brush. That's also partly to do with the timekeeping of the demonstration. I haven't got too long. So of course, working with a big brush is helping speed that process up enormously, taking some of that shadow up into the hair, but losing it and allowing it to disappear. I'm using, this is a hog brush. This is a hog bristle brush from Rosemary number 8. So it has a kind of a scratchy kind of quality. You can probably see the scratch marks within the paint on the canvas. Let's go a little bit lighter as we move down into the face. It has a slight sort of ochre palish tinge as we move into that. I'm going to bring a bit cool, a little bit of the blue, bizarrely, a tiny bit of blue, not too much. That's cobalt blue. If you've just joined and you want to know what the colours are, I'll go through them from top to bottom. So we've got titanium, no, we haven't got warm white by Michael Harding at the top. We've got warm white, and then all other colours by Michael Harding going from top to bottom are yellow ochre. We also have a brilliant orange. Is it brilliant orange? No, permanent orange. I apologise, permanent orange. Then we go down to Scarlet Lake, which is a little bit like cadmium red light, so a nice bright primary red. And those are the main warm colours. And then we've got the two cooler colours. I've got cobalt blue and raw umber. And raw umber is all this dark marks that you can see underneath. So relatively limited, quite restricted, not your typically classical colours. The orange is perhaps a little bit of a left field, and probably the cobalt blue as well is perhaps not a typical colour that we would associate with painting portraits. But I mean, one of the reasons why I've chosen the cobalt blue is it's going to be a wonderful balance and tonic to the orange. They are complementary colours. When you put these two colours together, orange and cobalt, things get quite exciting. And you can see that into relationship in the image, can't you? That kind of cool blue-grey of the background and the redness of the hair. There's something particularly quite exciting about that. So I'm going to play on that as we go. But for the moment, let's continue blocking some of these darker marks in. Now, the third and sort of final aspect of for me creating a strong drawing, and I still consider this drawing. I know I'm pushing paint around, but I'm still drawing. I'm still trying to find the likeness to complete the kind of trio of angles, which is going from point to point. That's number one. And then lines, using a vertical line or sometimes a horizontal line. For example, like the placement of the bottom of his earlobe. If I put a straight line going up, that's essentially the earlobe there is basically the same of the top of his upper lip. They're on the same horizontal line, for example. So those are my lines. The third and final thing I'm looking for is, of course, shapes. A little bit more raw umber. I'm looking for shapes. That famous saying, as they say, I'm painting shapes. I'm not painting things. Paint shapes, not things. If we start painting things that we think we know, we'll end up painting something that's a little obvious and contrived. And I don't want to do that. I want to create something that is, I suppose, true, has a sense of life and reality to it. So I'm simplifying this incredibly complex face by lighting it well, or it's been lit beautifully well for me. And I'm now painting those simple shapes. That for me is really important. Now, do I use these colors? Someone's asked. No, I don't use these colors. I think it's fair to say I paint in a variety of ways. So this isn't what I would call my standard palette. These colors I chose for this picture. Okay, I chose these colors because I thought it would work really well for this picture. Now, of course, I could use these colors for other portraits quite happily, and I'd be able to make of pretty much every single color I could possibly use for a portrait, but I will change it. I will always assess who I'm painting and what do I want to say about the person in this particular painting. And when I've understood and got those qualities established, that does help me choose the colors. Now, I am a bit of a colorist, and I've got a big wall of colors. I'll show you in the break of some of my favorite colors, which is quite a wide variety. I love the opportunity to use as many colors as possible, not to the point where it completely overwhelms a picture, but I think, like in a sweetie shop, when I see all the colors that are available to us, I think, oh, that would be exciting. What would happen if you put that color with that color, and so on. And And I think that just gives me a greater sense of freedom and poetry within my painting, that I can express it through color. I mean, color is, I think, probably the most emotive thing we have available to us as painters, isn't it? You know, color is an incredibly emotive, a very evocative aspect to painting. And if I want to get a sense of joy and energy and life, then leaning into really bright, exciting colors is a way that I can infuse the picture to get that feeling that I'm looking for. Whereas if I want a painting to be more, you know, reserved and quiet, again, the colors will often enhance that feeling. I'll keep things more subtle, more muted, or desaturated. So the colors will change according to what I want to say and what I want to convey. I tend not to use the same colors. Having said that, I do have a kind of, I suppose, a set of family of colors that I use probably most frequently. My kind of standard set, if you like, of colours. And if you're so interested, I'll quickly rattle through them. If you've got a pen and paper, you can write down kind of my favourite colours. So my favourite colours that I tend to use, you know, if I couldn't, my desert island colours, if you like, I would use, I've pretty much given up on titanium white. I now pretty much use exclusively warm white for the reasons I said at the beginning. It's just a little bit more forgiving. It's not as bleaching. It is more sympathetic for making realistic colours. It's just not quite as garish. So I'm not using titanium white, but I'm using warm white. I tend to use two yellows. The lighter yellow I use is Bright Yellow Lake. Bright Yellow Lake, and these are all Michael Harding colours. So Bright Yellow Lake, a fabulous colour, really strong, really acidic. You can make pretty much everything with that, which I really enjoy. And then I use yellow ochre, much more earth-based golden colour, which of course is really good for quite realistic representational flesh colours. I'm just starting to put in some light colours. You can see now I'm kind of leaning up to my light. As I move up the palette, you see my lighter colours are up here where my light is, and my darker colours are inevitably down here. The red is near the red. All the cool blue colours will eventually feature there. So where I'm mixing the colours, inevitably they're quite near the mother blob of all of those. So as I get lighter, I'm inevitably going up higher into the palette. Quite obvious, but I think kind of useful to point out. So Bright Yellow Lake and Yellow Ochre. Then I would go into my reds. I use Scarlet Lake, which is this one. I don't use cadmium red. And then I would use a kind of more pinky colour. I tend to favour alizarin crimson. I love it for that kind of very purple nature. Very, very good for mixing purples. So it's really, really useful for that. Very good for making skin, the kind of very aged old skin where that has that warm purpliness to it. So I would use that. There's a colour I'm using a lot. It kind of dips in and out of my palette, but I do quite like it. It's called Amethyst. Amethyst, a lovely, strong, rich, fruity, pinky purple. Really, really quite lovely to play with. And I use that from time to time. It's a colour that kind of pops onto my palette more and more these days. So I do love Amethyst. And then sometimes I will add a purple as well. That's you know, whether it is a bright purple dioxine, which is it's got a heck of a whack and a punch in it, but by golly, it is really, really lovely. So those all kind of live on the warm side of my palette, and if I remember, I'll show you. If I forget, ask me, but I'll try and show you my palette, my normal palette. This is my palette I use for teaching because it's just easy for you to see. But when I'm back in the studio, when I'm in the studio, sorry, and I'm not prattling on as I am now, then I will use my standing up handheld palette. It has those colours laid on it, and I'll see if I can remember to show you what they look like. And then they're all on the warm side of the palette, and then I go over to the cool side, or the dark side, the cooler dark side. And on the cooler dark side, I have transparent oxide red, which is a little bit like burnt sienna. That's a colour I use a lot. A really nice colour for base colours, like the ground that I've got here. So I often use that as a bit of a ground or a bit of a base. Then I would go down to Viridian Green. I love a Viridian Green, particularly Michael Harding's Viridian Green. I was speaking to a few of my students the other day during a workshop. We were talking about the challenges of Viridian Green and how sometimes it can just be a bit much, massively overwhelming and problematic. There's something really staining about some Viridian Greens. I don't know what Michael Harding's done to his Viridian Green, but it's got a softness which is yummy, and it works. It doesn't kind of contaminate and pollute, which I really, really like. Oh, it's gone quite purpley there, but quite interesting. which I'll kind of keep. So I got Viridian green, and then I use 2 blues. I use the cobalt blue I'm using now, and then ultramarine, probably my favorite color if I had to choose one. French ultramarine blue, of course, is just a gorgeous color. And then lastly, I would use raw umber as my kind of go-to dark. Now I do use plenty of other colors. You know, as I say, I'm a bit of a fan of colors. Any opportunity to show some color on, I'm there and I will do it. So I will use colors like black, which the clever ones of you go, hang on, Peter, black isn't a color, it's a tone. And if you thought that, you're absolutely right, you get 2 points. But I will use black sometimes if it is the right reason to use black. If I've got like a lot of black background or black clothing to paint, then I will use a black paint to help speed up that process. Other colors I'll use is this color I've got here. This is a lovely color, bright green lake. I mean, that's a green and a half, that is. If you get a bit of that on your painting, it really does wake it up. So that's a really lovely color to use. Another color I love playing with is this one called phthalocylene turquoise. A fantastically strong, very, very bold pigment, phthalocylene turquoise. So I use that as well. So a range of colors that I will play with according to what I'm trying to convey, but only if it's necessary and only if it is needed. Now you can see with the blocking, a lot of it has sort of been established in terms of the flesh color. I feel like I've got a lovely kind of fleshy sense of face there. There's a couple of little bits I want to get quickly filled in before we take a short mini break. I'm going to take a smaller clean brush. This is number 4, and I'm going to use this number 4 just to put in a little bit more information on the eyes and the lips. If there's any questions, I'll have a look through the questions during the break, and I'll take and try and answer them as many as I can. I can see lots coming up, so apologies if you're asking questions. I'll do my best to get back and answer them as we go. I'm going to put a little bit of warmth just on that right side of the lip. I'm trying to make my brushwork as economic and as clean as possible. I know I'm working quickly because of the time restraints, but truth be told, this is how I work anyway. I work quite strong, quite quickly, quite kind of boldly and confidently. This is a way that I love to work because I love to show off the strength of the mark making and the brush strokes. For me, that's quite an intrinsic aspect of the painting, to really showcase that. Let's get a sense of the coolness of the eye, the white of the eye. Now, we know the white of the eye is never white, so never, ever, ever paint that white eye. I mean, if I hold that, if you go closer, because that's not white at all, it's got a creaminess to it, okay? So never, ever paint the white of the eye pure white. It's just more of a name. So I'm making a sort of a coolish skin color gray there. I can lighten it a fraction. Using the warm white does help. If it was titanium white, it has a natural kind of bleaching quality. So let's just blob that on there. It goes slightly kind of pinker, almost purplier as well as it goes to the right-hand side. And you notice I'm just allowing the brushstrokes to melt into one another. I'm not worried about them looking outlined or perfect. I just want it to have this soft, melty quality. All the brushstrokes are merging in quite nicely to one another. It looks like he hasn't got an actual eye itself. I'll plonk an actual eye in a moment. If I look at the white of the eye on the right-hand side, you notice the white on the eye over here on the right is slightly darker. Why is this white on this side slightly darker than this one? Because it's in shadow. Okay, we can see that this right-hand side of the face is in shadow. We know and can see that this white of the eye is darker. So don't make them the same color. Again, a common mistake. People who are learning portraits often make those the same, but it's not. It's slightly darker. We can see it's darker. We know it's darker. So it's back to that. You've got to paint what you see. Okay, really, really see something and then apply. Don't sort of just work on assumption. Paint what you see. Don't paint what you know or you think you see. Less thinking, as I often say to my students, less thinking, more painting. If you think less and paint more and see more, quite often it will be a lot more accurate than having your eyes completely wide open. Now, speaking of eyes and the way that we are seeing, and I know that half of you, I know lots of my students are in the room tonight, and you're all going to go, oh, here he is, he's going to bang on, he's going to bang on about that thing that he always says we should do, but we always forget to do. And that is, let's see if any of you can put that down as it. What I'm thinking of course, is my ability to see not that much information. And what I'm doing, of course, is squinting. Okay, my eyes are doing this. In fact, I've been painting this whole picture with my eyes doing this. You see where my glasses are? My glasses are on the top of my head. So as I'm painting, I plonk them on my head and keep my eyes squinted. So I'm painting in a fuzzy way because that's how I'm seeing. I'm seeing this in a very, very fuzzy way. I'm not seeing this portrait in high accuracy, which won't surprise you. You can see I'm not seeing it in high accuracy. It's looking very questionable at the moment. But that's how I'm seeing it. And of course, because I'm painting in this very fuzzy, very loose manner, it simplifies it. And hopefully what I'm trying to get across is the whole game of painting for me, particularly for portrait painting, which is the hardest of them all, is simplification. How can we make our lives easier and simpler? And one of the things that I have at my disposal is my ability to reduce how I'm seeing and what I'm seeing. So I've been painting this whole picture with my eyes pretty much clamped shut. Now I wear glasses, just to reiterate, I am a glasses wearer. I have to wear glasses to legally to drive, and I wear glasses to read, because I need to be able to see what's going on, and I won't be insured otherwise if I was to drive and something was to happen and I didn't have my glasses on. Having glasses is a really important part for me to see things clearly. But when I paint, my glasses are, so they are on my head. I am not wearing them. Now, I am a poorly sighted man. My natural vision is really quite bad. If you were to pop my glasses on, you'll see that my children do this. You know, do you ever have sort of children where they take your glasses and they put them on, and they go, God, you really can't see anything. Well, my children put my glasses on. They kind of can't believe how, you know, poorly sighted, if that's any resemblance of how I actually see. In terms of what my eyes are doing, one eye is short-sighted and one eye is long-sighted, so it's all over the place. And my right eye this is awful. I can barely see anything out of this eye. It's really quite poor. So I'm a poorly sighted man. I can't see really anything, and I am also squinting. Okay, so one eye is doing one or the other. So I can see practically nothing. Okay, that's what I'm seeing, which is very, very minimal. And that is helping me achieve this mess, which is essentially what it is. This is just a sort of a big, sloppy mess. But because I'm focusing on what matters, I'm focusing on the larger shapes, these larger masses, because that is really all that matters, are those large shapes, to create something that is structurally convincing, as hopefully the portrait will end up being at the end. And remember, I'm still trying to find the likeness. I'm still trying to get it to look like him. I want it very much to feel like him. And that development of his likeness is continuing as I lay on these marks. You can see it's sort of getting, hopefully, feels more and more like Icarus, more and more like him as the painting develops. I'm never going to get better than that photograph. You know, the photograph's doing a wonderful job in high accurate representationism. I've got something better than the photograph. I've got these things. I've got sticks with hair on. I've got these great blobs of colour. I've got texture. I've got movement. I've got so much more available to me than what the camera has to create something that I think feels more like the character, more like him than perhaps the photograph can convey. The photograph's very good at conveying a certain number of things, but what I hope the brushes can do is say something a little bit more. I'm going to put a couple little marks on. I'm going to take a very short little break, and I want to tell you some exciting news and latest development information. Let's just put a little dark mark. I've just made a bit of cobalt blue and raw umber just to sort of put in that dark mark there. Not an eye, but just a blob. I've not painted an eye. I've just painted just a blobby area. And what's happening is that your brain, your eye, is joining up the dots, completing the information. It's amazing. I don't need to paint or do much for it to read convincingly. And for me, that's one of the best magical things about painting. Just a few marks and a few dots, and then the human brain goes, gosh, that looks awfully like whatever or such and such. And for me, that is some of the magical aspects of painting. You don't need to say it all. You don't need to paint it all. You can actually leave a lot out, leave more to the imagination. And then I was like, what often happens is that it becomes so much more interesting to look at, so much more appealing to engage with, as opposed to this exercise of, oh, it has to look like the photograph. No, it doesn't. Let the photograph look like the photograph. Let yours look like a painting. So that is essentially the block-in stage complete, minus an upper lip. Let's just quickly get that in. Glasses off, strap yourselves in. Here we go. Right, what do I do now? So I'm going to start a little bit of amending, a little bit of correcting, and I'm going to use a couple of smaller brushes. I've got these number 2s, so I use the number 2s. This is a smaller brush, the smallest brush that I use. I tend not to go any smaller than those. I've got a couple of teeny ones that I might use for little bits, but for me, I think this is as small as appropriate, particularly for a kind of a bigger, looser painting like this. And I want to start using these brushes. There's no paint on this, by the way. I'm just going to use the paint that exists on the canvas, and already I can start just move some of the paint around, so I can start correcting and changing aspects. Like I just wanted to kind of change that a little bit there. I'm going to start picking up some paint straight away now with the other one. The reason I've got 2 brushes, one brush is going to be reserved more for my darker brush strokes, while the other one can be reserved for my sort of lighter brush strokes. Or if it's temperature based, one can be reserved for the warmer brush strokes, while the other can be reserved for the cool. So it's kind of a good thing with the oil painters, and I do this with acrylic as well, actually. On those rare times I go mad and go, do you know what, I'm going to work with acrylic today. I'll often work with 2 brushes because it just gives me that ability to move the paint around and to pick up the colors straight away without me having to massively overthink everything. So I'm constantly swapping brushes as we go. Put a little bit of dark there. Let's just look at the light part of the eye, just add a little bit more. So these marks, these smaller marks, are of course the bits that give us that sense of likeness. And likeness is often hinged on, you know, a millimeter or so. Now, even though I'm working with smaller brushes, I'm still painting in quite a, you know, relatively bold, direct way. Every brush I'm putting down, I'm desperately still trying to make deliberate and decisive. I want it to land and be as unfussed and as unfiddled and unplayed with as possible. For me, that's quite an important part, because I want the painting to still maintain that sense of energy. So even though I've got small brushes, and I have got small brushes, these are number 2s, I'm still trying to put them on as economically as possible. I'm trying to make a little do a lot. And that's, for me, an aspect of painting that I love in the artists whom I admire most, some of which we've already discussed, Soroya and Sargent and others. You know, I love their bold painterliness, where they haven't fussed and fiddled the brushstrokes away. I love it when you can see the hand of the artist, you know, the way you can see where Van Gogh has moved the paint around, or David Hockney has used the paintbrush to describe the character of the subject. You know, I love that, where you can see where the hand of the artist has been. And for me, that's the visibility of the mark and the brushstroke. And it's the most exciting part, I think, of a painting are the brush strokes. It's the bit that celebrates, for me, the fact that it is a painting. And I love painterly paintings. I love paintings that look like paintings, that feel like paintings, that they're completely unapologetically a painting. And I just absolutely adore the painterliness, where you can see texture and marks and thickness and thinness and all the things that paint can do. I think is so exciting, because it's such a gorgeous material, isn't it, paint? I think it's just the thick, gloopy, blobby stuff can produce such wonderful effects that can move people to tears, that can become suddenly nostalgic and make us think of places or people or moments just blobs of colour moved around by a stick with some hair on the end. That magical power that paintings have, and it's the texture and the mark making that for me is that bit of poetry, the dynamics, like in music, you know, the volume and pace and so on, that we get in the brush strokes. So I've just done a little bit more movement in that area, but I'm still painting in a confident way. I'm being deliberate and decisive. I'm trying to make every stroke count. I'm trying to make every mark land. Sometimes they land well, sometimes they don't. And if they don't, like that one didn't, I'll just rub it out or paint over it until I find that it works and it lands better. And of course, with anything, things come with experience and practice and patience and disaster after disaster after disaster. And I've got a whole drawer full of disasters, which I tend not to show people, but I do have a whole drawer of paintings that were disasters, that are disasters, but that's fine. You've got to make mistakes in order to learn and to move on. That's all the whole point of learning. So I've got an eye starting to happen there. I'll give you a little secret about painting eyes. Paint eyes softly. Don't paint them crisply, paint them softly. In fact, let me give you a close-up. Okay, I know we'll lose a bit of palette, probably a bit of photograph. Okay, that's as close as I can get without you getting in my way and vice versa. I'm gonna paint this eye softly, just watch. Just gonna melt the edges. I'm not blending, I'm just softening. I'm softening the edges of these brush strokes so they gently melt and merge into one another. What that's doing is just helping the eye look a little bit more real, like it's the sense of animation, like it's just flickering and moving. No tight lines or edges. Softness. Little magic. A little bit of light mark there. And that's going to help an eye look so much more realistic than if you paint it crisp and hard with a solid, like it's got eyeliner around it. That's an eye that's going to look fixed and stifled and false. I want an eye that just feels like it's just looked at you, and then you look back and it feels like it's just looked the other way. Painting your eyes softly is one of the clever magic ways of doing that. Let's add a little bit more paint now and just start to develop something of the nose. I want to get a bit lighter. As I'm putting this paint on, my paint's getting thicker. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but the paint is getting thicker. Already it's quite thick. One of the questions, I think a couple of questions have been come through about what medium are you using? I'm not using any medium. Okay, the only medium I used at the start was a bit of the solvent, just to put the thin, and that's the Miracle medium. That's solvent free. It's this new solvent free plant-based odorless medium. So that was essentially what my turpentine in the olden days. But that's the only thing I've used. Everything else is just paint. Neat, delicious, gloopy, yummy, although don't eat it, paint. I'm just going to get a bit more orange, because there's enough oil in the paint for it to move around and for me to do what I wanted to do. And on those occasions where I've started to use things like, linseed oil or other painterly mediums, I suddenly found that it was taking away the thickness of the painting, and I was, horror, starting to overwork the painting. It started to become pernickety and fiddly and all those other things which I never like in paintings. So I try and use the paint neat as much as possible. If I do need it to move around a little bit, if I do need it to have a slightly kind of more sympathetic coverage, I might use a tiny bit of linseed oil or Miracle medium or whatever that's available. But it's, incredibly rare and very, very little if one actually does. I'm just going to do a little bit of measuring. I'm still measuring, by the way. I'm still checking. I'm not just filling my picture in. I'm still trying to get things in the right place. So just looking at that little cool blue highlight and just making sure that it's still in that area. That was still the right place for it to go. So I'm still measuring, still checking. Measure twice and cut once sort of approach. Don't just assume that everything's right. I can see that, things constantly need looking at and reworking. I'm going to go a little bit darker. If I want to make a nice strong dark, I'll mix the raw umber with a bit of the cobalt blue, as I've just done there, just to give it a little bit more darkness. I need to get more raw umber. So you see I'm constantly replenishing the palette. As soon as the palette or the blob of colour is finished, reload straight away. Don't make do without. Again, I've been in the classroom so many times and I've just seen the artist going, oh, I've run out of that. I'm just going to, I'll just keep using all the other colours up first. And of course, what they end up doing is just starving the palette of the colour that it needs to be. And of course, then they're making false colours, the colours that aren't visible in the picture at all. And then that's, you know, a real shame. So as soon as I run out of a colour, I reload it straight away. Nice, good blob of it, a generous palette. Working with generous paint, okay, because I want the painting to have that wow painterly quality. I want to, whoever ends up owning this young man, whoever ends up owning Icarus on their wall, you know, I want to go, wow, I've got a lot of paint, got a lot of paint on my painting here, got a lot of bang for my buck. I want them to feel like I was able to identify where Peter was moving that paint around. So don't starve your palette, okay? It's a common thing I say in my classes a lot. This is in my in-person classes when I'm walking around. I'll start writing the letters UMP on my, I was going to write it there, but I best not. Write it on his hair. I'll do that. I'll put U. Oh, you can't see that. Let's put that UMP. For those of you that have been in the class and I've told you off for UMP, what does UMP stand for? UMP stands for use more paint. Use more paint. Don't starve your palette and use more paint. If you do that, the paintings will at least look a little bit more interesting, even if they're a little bit inaccurate. At least there's some paint on there to play with. At least there's some paint on there to move around. Easier to correct, of course. If there's more paint on the surface, it can be easier to correct. But at least it's got a painting. You have a painting that's got a little bit of guts and oomph to it than a painting that's just starved. I hate paintings where the artist has just been a bit frugal. They're sort of tight and stingy, so just use more paint. Chuck it on. Move it around. So I'm putting on now. Got to make sure I don't make this highlight, as I have done, too bright. Okay, it's too bright here. Can you see it's quite close in value to the one on the right? It's a fraction darker, but I want to make this a little bit brighter, really darker, sorry. Of course, we've identified that it is on the darker side of the face, so I do need to make it darker. So I just need to knock it back a little bit using a bit of the red, little bit of the umber. Well, that's too much. Let's lighten up with a bit of orange, because otherwise it's going to flatten the face. Okay, I don't want to flatten the face. So now I can put in that a little bit lighter. I'm going to use ochre as my lightening agent. So it's about there. I don't really want to go too lighter than that. Otherwise, the face will look flat. Okay. And that was just easy, just a case of just to move that paint that was pre-existing on the palette, just to move that all around. Now there is one thing that I'm doing which you can't see apart from squinting. I'm still squinting. I'm still doing that. I'm still squinting. Promise. I'm still squinting. One thing that you cannot see, which I think is another important thing that I'm doing, which is integral to the way that I paint and the fluency, how fluent this all comes across and is feeling, is the brush hygiene. Now what I'm doing is I'm jumping between colours. I just put a kind of an orangey mark down, and now I'm putting the kind of the dark inner nostril in. And then the brush goes out of sight, and now I'm suddenly mixing a lighter colour. And as I go up the palette, and then I'm suddenly moving across, and then suddenly it goes to kind of a bluer colour. And I'm jumping around a lot. And people think, how on earth are you keeping the brush sort of clean? Now, one thing that I'm doing, which you can't see, is that I'm wiping my brush clean. I'm wiping my brush clean between almost every other mix sometimes. So I'm creating cleaner, concise mixes. Now, sometimes I will use a bit of kitchen paper. I'll have a bit of kitchen paper in my left hand, as I'll do that, and I'll kind of pinch it, and I'll literally sort of do that. I'll go pinch, paint, 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 pinch, reapply, apply the brush stroke, pinch it off, figure out brushstroke, reapply, and so on. I'll kind of do that. When I haven't got the kitchen paper in my hand, what I'll do is I am rubbing or wiping my brush on a cloth, and that cloth is actually attached to my apron. It's like on my right thigh, if you like. It's sort of just dangling down there, and I'm using that to kind of clean my brush. I wipe it clean. I'm not washing my brush clean. I haven't washed these brushes at all throughout this demonstration. I barely wash my brushes full stop, let alone during painting sessions. Don't tell Rosemary. But I rarely wash the brushes as the painting is developing. So I wipe the brushes clean as opposed to wash them clean. And for me, that just keeps the painting kind of consistent. It keeps it all going nicely. It keeps my color mixes more accurate and stops getting, of course, the big problem, of course, that a lot of people experience in painting, which is muddy colors. I'm not getting muddy colors because I'm keeping my brush wiped clean between as it moves from mixture to mixture. So brush hygiene is quite an important aspect of, for me, painting and keeping those colors clean. A question came up earlier, I noticed, about, do I pre-mix my colors? And my colors are not pre-mixed. I'm just using them as I go. I never pre-mix my colors. I don't sort of sit down and think, right, what colors am I going to use today, and pre-mix everything. There's a couple of reasons why I don't do that. Number one, it takes forever, and I just want to get on and shove some paint on. So it's partly impatience. I just don't want to spend hours mixing every color. And I've done it before, and it takes ages, and life's too short to be doing that. So I don't do it for that reason. That's my own concentration level, I think, that's revealing there. Number two, when I have done it, I spent all that time mixing all those colors, and I thought, great, I have them all available to me. And I actually start then, putting all the paint down. And then suddenly I run out of a color, because I was like, I didn't mix enough of that, because I was sort of unable to identify the exact quantity that I was going to need. So then I needed to mix more and more and more. And then what I realized is that color that I hadn't mixed enough of, had to go and mix more of it. But then I made tons of a color that I only needed a few brushstrokes out of. And then what I ended up is wasting a load of paint because I wrongly planned the correct amount. So I tend not to. Right, I don't mix as we go. I don't pre-mix all my colors. I just mix, as you can see today, on the fly as the painting is developing, because that for me is, well, that's more authentic. All the colors are joined up on the face, and all the colors are joined up on the palette. It sort of makes sense, really, when I think about it. All the colors joined up on the palette because all the colors are joined up on the face. I don't work in these little pools or puddles on the palette. You can see it's all kind of merged from the lighter colors, and it goes down all the way down to the dark. And if I just pull you back a little bit, then just so you can see everything in context. So I don't work in anything that's sort of pre-planned or pre-mixed. I just sort of go straight in. But that good palette management, as this is, having all the color organized, is quite important, as is the brush hygiene. So I'm able to work in this because I am making sure that I keep my brushes really clean as the painting develops. So I've just sculpted the nose a little bit. It's still got a bit more work to do, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly go down. Let's start looking at that kind of darker shadow shape as we move down. I am stepping back a lot, by the way. I'm always sort of stepping back from the picture to get as much distance from it as I can. With my nose pressed up against the canvas, it can be too much. So do step back, and I always step back and see how the painting looks, because up close we might think it looks fantastic, and then you stand back and you go, oh, it really isn't, or vice versa. Up close you think, oh, it's terrible, but actually when you stand back you think, it's not actually that bad, actually, which is the better outcome, I find, the better way around. So standing back is really important to sort of get a gauge of how everything is looking. I'm going to move these lips up a little bit. I'm still drawing. You notice things are still moving. Nothing is fixed in a portrait. Nothing's ever fixed. It can move constantly. If I wanted to move the lips 3 inches down, I can. If I wanted to give him another eye, I can. I can do whatever I like. It's not fixed. I don't paint in a kind of a fixed, staged, colouring in, colour in the lines sort of way. It's free, it's more loose, it's more organic, it's more, dare I say it, arty to paint in this sense of discovery. And I am discovering this face, and hopefully the likeness is getting better. You notice the likeness is with every mark, it should feel like it's improving. It should feel like it's getting that little bit better. And if it doesn't, I'll keep finding it. I'll keep battling. I'll keep moving him left and right. I'll move the feature up, down, left, right, until it gets better and better and better. A little bit of highlight there on his lip, just so it stands out. And I get a little bit more of the warm white. If you haven't got warm white, by the way, you can make warm white. It's very easy. What you do is you just get titanium white, which is a colour we mostly have, and then just mix a little bit of yellow ochre into it. Just sort of mix it. You can either do it pre-advanced with a palette knife, or just sort of do it with the brush. But if you just add a little bit of yellow ochre, that just takes that sting out of the coldness of it, and you sort of essentially have, that's what warm white is. The Michael Harding warm white, it's titanium white with a little bit of the yellow ochre mixed into it, just to soften it back from being quite so cold. So quite easy to make yourself, but if you're lazy like me, then it's nice to squeeze out a little bit of warmth. Not bright red, of course. Lips are not bright red, otherwise it'll look like there's lipstick. There is warmth, yes, but very subtle with the warmth. We don't want to lean in too heavy with the bright red. Again, it's that kind of, it's the same when, you know, a bit white of the eye, people put white in, and of course it's not white. Same with lips, aren't red. They're not red at all. I can see that there's this gorgeous little shadow just as it sits on that part of the mouth. I can lift that up a little bit. I've neglected the eye on the right, which is remiss of me. I should quickly do a little bit of something and softening. Practice what I was saying about keeping the eyes sort of soft. Now, with my online painting classes, I can promise you we don't do it this quickly. we slow it down. We have 3 hours where it's much more step by step by step. So if you do wish to paint along with me on my classes, it is a lot slower, a lot slower. I mean, quick enough for me to try and get it finished within 3 hours, not an hour and a half to 2 hours as I'm doing right now, but certainly in a more manageable way. And I know lots of artists that do paint with me in that kind of step-by-step manner. However, of course, if you don't get it finished, of course, you can work on it for the rest of the week until the following week's class. And of course, you have that access on the Zoom recording. I know some people like to watch the Zoom recording and paint with me, because then they can pause and kind of catch up. Or some of them mute me for reasons I best not go into while they're muting me, but they'll mute me and just sort of watch what I'm doing, which is absolutely fine. You work with the recording how you want to do it. So in the classes, the paint along classes, they are designed to paint along if you would like to. And I sort of teach it in a manner, sort of imagining lots of you are painting along live. However, I know that, I say, lots tend to just sit down and watch their cup of tea, or they watch the first part and then disappear, and they'll catch up on the recording later. The most important thing is you can mold it around the way you want to learn. That is the most important thing. And depending on the number of people in the class as well, it's always nice to have a little chit chat as well. So I allow the ability for the class so we can have a little catch up and chat during the lessons. And it's always nice to see at the end of the lesson how you've done, if you have painted along. So if you have painted along, you can show me what you've done, and I can give a couple little comments on it as well, depending on the numbers of people on the workshop as well. So there is that opportunity for more interaction, which is a lot nicer and more fun. So I've just softened a little bit of the information here on the right hand side. There's some lovely, what I call little moments of light. I love this. You see this on the ear there? That gorgeous, that little bit of light, really beautiful. And then we've got that orange just hitting underneath. Just check. I'm looking at his earlobe. You see the bottom of his earlobe? If I bring my stick up, the bottom of his earlobe is essentially where the top of the lips are. So the top of the lips there, earlobe. Oh, it was in the right place. That's reassuring. And sort of get that light hitting the earlobe, swapping the brush to a darker brush so I can just get a sense of that inner darkness of his ear in there like that. Now I will stick around at the end and I'll go through as many questions as I can. Kimberly has sent me a load of questions via email. I can see lots of questions are popping through. So apologies, I'm not answering them live. I want to try and get as much of this done as possible, but I'll stick around and I'll answer as many questions as we go at the very end. And of course, I will stick around, of course, if you'd like to find out who's won that prize. Let's get rid of UMP. I am using more paint, so I'm just going to scribble that away. Let's get, oh, there's so much I want to do, so much I want to do. A little bit of darkness on there, wiping the brush clean. Lift up the orange. I probably won't want to do much to the neck because I kind of feel that's sort of fine enough. I don't think it's particularly possibly just lighten down there a fraction. I love that cool kind of grey under there. That cool light using the cobalt white. This sort of bit of blue, reddish purple. It's sort of whatever's left on the palette really. Lovely light on the jaw under there. That's beautiful bit of what we call reflected light. We're going to talk a lot about reflected light and different qualities of light on the on my painting light class. If that's a particular preoccupation of yours, as it often is mine. Then we're going to talk more about that. I'm going to put, I love that coppery, gingery, you know, where his freckles are on his neck there, which is just beautiful. So I'm just going to suggest that there with a hint of that warm orange. This is where orange is great because, of course, it's getting that complexion. It's not just the hair. The obvious obvious thinking is that, oh, I've chosen orange because he's a redhead. Actually, not really. It's to do with that kind of warmth of the skin is as important as the fact that, of course, he has beautiful coppery orange hair. So it is much to do with that. Let's get something of that dark shadow shape. Ooh, just down there. Warm it up a little bit with a hint of the orange. I told you I liked orange. Just works so well with flesh colours. Let's just knock that back a little bit. Feeling very Soroya-esque and Sargent-esque with that kind of flick of a mark. Now what I want to do is to get in, this can be quite controversial now, what's it going to look like if I get in a cool blue background? Now the answer is I don't know, so I'm going to find out what that looks like. I'm going to take a clean brush. This is a clean brush, like number 6 it feels like, and I'm going to use a little bit of solvent. So this has got a little bit of the solvent in, so I'm going back to a medium. So just putting that on the brush and just seeing what happens, hello, when I do this. Now, instantly, we've got something really quite fascinating here. And this is why colour is just endlessly exciting and fascinating. We've got, our eyes are being excited now because suddenly we've got boom, cool and warm. Now it looked quite nice without that. You can see that's quite traditional. If I get rid of that, there's something nice, warm and biscuity and traditional. But I'm not a boring traditional painter. I love a bit of opportunity to splash a bit of colour on. And I'm going to keep some of that base colour through because I think some of that base colour is quite important. But if I really want to make something of his orange hair, which of course is such a characterful element to this picture, one of the best things I can do, of course, is to show the orange against this blue. And we all know the significant quality of blue and orange is, of course, they are complementary colours. They are opposite each other on the colour wheel. And when you put these two together, near each other, something just really exciting starts to happen. You start to really show off what colours, how colours behave and what they want to do when you put them near and next to each other. It's a welcome cool because the whole picture's been quite warm. So you've got a welcome temperature shift. I'm going to lift his shoulder up a tad, like that. And it gives me opportunities to be slightly more contemporary, just in the way that I like to play with paint sometimes. So I'll find opportunities just to put traces of the blue in the hair. So let me show you. I'm going to swap down to my smaller brushes, my two smaller number twos. It's the same number twos. I'm just going to clean them off like that. Just take off the excess paint. And let's just have a little bit of play, a bit of firework play. So I'm going to take some of this, I mean, that's pretty much neat cobalt blue, tiny bit of white, just to take the intensity off. There we are. And let's just start putting some of it in the hair, which you think, why on earth is there blue in the hair? But there isn't blue in the hair. In reality, there isn't, but there is in the painting. Because when I put this blue in the painting, this is the cool antidote, this is the balance to the orange, and it will just set the orange on fire. It just has that amazing, excited, dynamic quality and feeling to it just by putting in that in. And I can start putting in bits of it, say, in the skin, like traces of coolness. I've just put a little bit of white, and I'm putting some of this blue in parts of the face, and you can see some of it is quite cool, like for example under the eyes, which I've already indicated by that sense of purple. But I can go in now with this blue and start to plonk it in. Any opportunity to shove in some colour, I'm like, yes please, hello. Let's put some blue in. You know, I can see just sometimes just down the filtrum there, just a little bit down that middle bit, a little bit on the underpass of the nose, a little bit there. And kind of the more I see and the more I look into the picture, I can see that there's sort of blue everywhere. And there's all these invitations to say, well, put some here, put some there. And it just elevates, for me, of course, I'm only painting for myself, it just elevates the painting to be something so much more exciting than just, oh, you've copied the photograph. These blues are not in the photograph, they are in my painting, and hopefully are a better painting as a result of it, a better representation of our subject because of those blues. And let's just finally, in the last couple of seconds, I'm just going to go a little bit lighter with some of those highlights in the hair. They are sort of yellowy-ish, but I'm going to go white, and yeah, we've got those a little bit. Let's try and put the more ochre in, actually, see what that looks like. It's not too bad. Just a couple of little squiggles, a little marks, just to show how some of that highlights feature on the head. And do you know what? Let's be brave. Let's put some orange. Look at this, some fiery orange, just in a couple of areas to show around the face. And it just suddenly seems so much more like a little ancient Greek character now. I keep hanging around with Bacchus. And he's up to mischief, like a little Puck from Midsummer's Night Dream or something. These oranges are just taking that picture just that tiny bit more. So I'm exaggerating those oranges. And of course, those are chiming with the blues, still making every stroke count. Trying to be in deliberate, decisive as much as possible. If I had a little bit more time, I'd probably put a little bit more orange and colour into the face. In fact, that part of the face is still pretty much unpainted, this bit of the neck. I can hear the bell chiming outside my studio saying that the time is pretty much done for now. Do I like that mark? I'm not sure. I'm just knock that back there. Do I like that edge mark? Yes, that's not too bad. I'm okay with that. So, in a nutshell, a very, granted, speedy nutshell, that is sort of my approach to painting a portrait. And as I said at the start of the demonstration, there's no right or wrong way to paint a portrait. And I paint portraits in a variety of ways, but I think this is perhaps the most, I suppose, authentic, the most free and the most liberating and the most, most me I can be when painting is in this manner. And there's a sort of a freedom and fluency and spontaneity to painting like this, which truly is a real honor and privilege to be able to do, to call my Just call my job. So there you go. That's my funnel. That's essentially where I was painting it from. I can see proportionally there's bits that need changing, the nose and the width, but that just gives you an idea. So if you can see how thick those marks are, that sense of life and animation, how those oranges and blues are right next door to each other, so they ping and pop and all come together. And there's the palette there. So thank you. Lots of people saying thank you. I can see all your lovely comments. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Hopefully that came across. You've got to enjoy it. It's a real pleasure to do this. So thank you. And if you are keen, if any of that has tempted you, and why wouldn't it? Come and join me this winter. I'd love to take you on this journey where I can teach you not just this, but loads of other things I'd like to share with you about the way that I paint on some of my classes online this winter, or maybe in person as well. I'd love to see you there.